In an earlier video I introduced the idea of linear programming, and I want to extend that idea today and have a look at, well, how education's policies might be analysed using a process like linear, a conceptual framework like linear programming. And again, as I said before, but I'll say again, I'm going to do this analysis in 2 dimensions, and it's possible to extend it to other dimensions to include more possibilities, to be more sophisticated. But as a very simple illustration of how this might be done, we're going to look at some choices, and the first job is to define a space in which those choices could be made. And I'm going to choose a school, and I'm going to suggest that the choices that are being made are choices about the budget. We're going to spend some money for some staffing costs. We're going to pay teachers, and we're going to spend some money on materials. It's simplistic, but let's suppose that the choices that the managers of the school have to make are between spending money on staff or spending money on materials. And they've got a budget. So whatever the amount of money that they've got to spend must be within budget, and the line that represents a constant amount of money is this one. So that maximum budget that they've got, and so they're going to have to work in this area. Now we better do a few calculations because we've got some staff already on contract. This year's staff, some of them may have left, some of them may have retired, some of them may be on salary scales where the salaries increase year on year. We have a certain amount of money that is committed to being spent on staff. And so whatever happens, unless we fire people, and we may have extra costs for doing that, come back to that later, we've got to spend at least this much money on staffing costs. That's set by what we're committed to. And then we may have normal wear and tear on the buildings that need to be paid for, or replacement of school textbooks. There may be a minimum amount of money that needs to be spent on materials, and so there's a constraint here that we can't go beyond. And so these 3 constraints, to keep it simple, define a space where the school policies can work. They can allocate a budget within this area. Now other people may have ideas about where they want the school to operate in terms of spending, but if they don't lie within that area, they're not going to work. Having said that the boundaries are defining the area in which the policies can work, the boundaries are not absolutely rigidly fixed. What would happen, as mentioned the case, suppose I want to reduce staffing costs, and that might mean that I'm going to fire some members of staff. I'm going to try and move this boundary back. Well, there's going to be a cost to that. The unions are not going to like it. I'm going to have to upset a lot of people, and there's going to be a cost, Am I prepared to pay the cost in terms of my reputation as a caring head teacher? Am I prepared to risk my the feelings of the staff? I'm going to damage staff morale. Is the cost of moving that boundary enough to make it worth it if I want to operate in a space below that boundary? Similarly, it may be possible to move the overall budget. I might be able to get additional funding. Can I get sponsorship? Can I get local businesses to put money into the school for some projects? How difficult is it going to be to raise that extra funding, and is my time going to be well spent trying to move that boundary, or will I try and leave it where it is? And similarly with the materials, the boundaries can be moved, but there's always a cost to moving them. On the other hand, once I've satisfactorily done this, I've got a fairly clear idea of where the school can operate. It's not deterministic. It doesn't have to be in one place. I still have choices within the circumstances that my school is in. But now I have taken a view on how the budget will be spent. Other people may have other ideas about how the finances should be spent. The Parent Teachers Association may want smaller classes. They may want more money spent on staffing. They might like this boundary to be moved up here, which means that to satisfy them, the school would operate in this smaller area. Can they persuade me that I'm happy to employ extra staff in order to operate the school in this more constrained area? And bear in mind that there may not be the PTA idea of where the school should be might be constrained over here. This area might be where the Parent Teachers Association wants the school to operate, and I'm operating over here. Can we negotiate some sensible agreement whereby their constraints, my constraints are moved in such a way that there is a workable area? This is the workable area that I have at the moment. Can I persuade other people that that's workable? Can other people be persuaded to help me move that constraints if they want to operate somewhere else? And I agree if I agree that that's a desirable thing to do. So we have a tool for looking at, but asking ourselves exactly how and in what places policies are going to fail. If the school moves in this direction, we cross that boundary, we don't have enough money. If we move in that direction, we don't have enough staff to do the job. And if we do move in that direction, the staff won't have textbooks, they won't have films, they won't have audio cassettes, they won't have materials to teach the children. Which is the most serious failure? What kind of failure do we don't, I think sufficiently about the failure of policy. We tend to be optimistic, over-optimistic, and say, oh, we've got a wonderful new curriculum, we've got a new policy that's going to solve the problems. I'm also interested, I should be interested in how and when the policies are going to fail. I mean, the building. You're in a building, probably, watching this, and if you're in a building, you ought to think about the engineer or architect who designed the building. The architect or engineer who designed the building had to think the building has to be up and stand every day. It's got to do its job. The rooms have to be a particular size, the spaces have to be airy and light. All of those considerations come into designing a building, its everyday use. But I hope that the person who designed this building also thought about when it's going to fall down, because if it does fall down one day, if there's an earthquake and the building collapses, I would like the building to collapse slowly. And the reason I'd like it to collapse slowly is because it will give me a chance to get out. So I'm concerned about how policies fail, and I don't think we pay enough attention to that. Linear programming offers a small insight and a small handle on how policies fail, what boundaries they cross, and in crossing those boundaries, what the nature of the failure is. Again, looking at a video by Rick Lavoie, he says that we're teachers, we're not particularly good at differential diagnosis. Doctors do it. The people present with similar systems, headaches or dizziness or aches and pains, and they're able to tell the difference between low blood pressure and a temporary virus. They're able to tell the difference between different causes for different diseases that produce different effects in the human being. We're not terribly good at that. As educators, we're not very good at spotting the difference between different ways in which children have difficulty. In policy terms, we're not very good at deciding what it is, what's specific about a policy is failing and how it affects the way in which it fails. So I'm putting this forward to you as a framework which might be useful. Again, I've written about some elements of financing education that might use such a system of analysis to look at how institutions can be in situations that are sustainable. Well, if the policy is going to work, there has to be a space where the institution can work effectively year on year, and that space is going to disappear if the cost of materials rises dramatically, or if the cost of salaries rises dramatically and the budget doesn't increase. The space where the school can operate will be further constrained, and that space may actually disappear. And when you present people with policies that cannot possibly work, it does tend to dishearten them and discourage them. So this is a way of looking at policies. But notice, as a researcher, your first job, the imaginative job, the exciting job, is to decide what defines the space that you're looking at. Staffing costs, material costs, building costs, legal legislation on health and safety, nutrition of school meals, whatever it is, there'll be various different elements that contribute to and constrain what the school can do. And this is a way of seeing how they directly impact upon the operation and the operational area within which a school can operate.